If you haven't heard, San Diego 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick recently caused some controversy by refusing to stand during the national anthem at NFL games. His reasoning is, I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color. I find his decisions and people's outrageous reactions to be a bit of a cluster of fascinating silliness, but I don't hear many people having a reasonable, balanced conversation about it, so let's analyze it a bit. I'm going to start by defending Kaepernick's decision, and later on I'll explain why I'm still not completely on board with how he's going about this. First, I've seen a lot of people attacking Kaepernick for calling out America's oppression of black people merely on the basis that he happens to be rich and makes a living playing a sport, essentially living the American dream. But just because he's filthy rich doesn't mean he's not entitled to empathize with other people and stand up for them. I'm not gay, but does that mean I had no business advocating for equality of homosexuals all those years of my life? I'm not a woman, but does that mean I'm only allowed to advocate for gender equality on issues where men are treated unfairly, and I'm not allowed to attempt to understand a woman's perspective and advocate for her rights accordingly? Of course not. It's called empathy. Kaepernick was born poor, but adopted as an infant by a well off white couple, raised without missing a meal, and was a three sport varsity athlete and 4.0 student who's basically won the genetic and social lottery to be talented and intelligent enough, plus adopted into a family financially stable enough to support him for anything he wanted to do. That means that when he shows empathy to those who aren't as fortunate as he is, he deserves more respect for it, not less. So, if you want to attack him for refusing to stand during the national anthem just because he's rich and hasn't necessarily experienced the oppression that he's speaking out against, you need to find a better angle. People seem far more upset about the thing Kaepernick is not doing than they are about his actual message. So, if Kaepernick just said that he isn't proud of this country because it oppresses or has oppressed people of color, I don't think people would really care that much. They'd probably just shrug it off and be okay with it. I mean, a lot of people are bringing that issue up at this time, but it hasn't raised the kind of controversy that not standing during the national anthem has. Surely, just about every American, including all of the 49ers who do stand for the anthem, have something that this country has done or is doing of which he or she isn't proud. Maybe it's that your country's privatized prisons lock away more people than any other country in the world. Land of the free. Maybe you're ashamed of the antiquated education system that refuses to grow at the rate that it needs to. Maybe you're ashamed of the bloated military expenditures and congressional decisions to, say, have 2,000 unneeded Abraham tanks refurbished for $3 billion, even though the Pentagon told Congress they didn't need them. At any rate, even patriotic people have some things about their country that they don't like. Hell, let's say you're a racist white person and you're ashamed of a country that dares to vote a half black Hawaiian man into the Oval Office for 2 terms. But that's just it. It's not Kaepernick's lack of American pride that has people pissed off. It's his refusal to play the symbolic gesture game and stand for the national anthem. That's important because he's not even committing an outright gesture of disrespect. He's not giving Old Glory the middle finger or blasting NWA Straight Outta Compton album from a boombox while the anthem is playing. He's just sitting down in a gesture of essentially neutrality rather than reverence for the song. And that has you angry? Did you even realize how absurd that sounded before I explained it back to you like that? That would be like if black people didn't really care about the KKK's outwardly racist ideology, but they'd get really pissed off if they saw them wearing white sweatshirts, after Labor Day. The symbolism should never be considered more biting than the actual ideology that it represents. Of course, the heaviest layer of irony I have to mention in defense of Kaepernick is this. We Americans sure do love our First Amendment right. We love our freedoms of speech and expression, right until someone starts saying and expressing things with which we disagree. I never know if I should laugh or cry at the irony of soldiers getting angry when citizens actually use the freedom they claim to have fought so hard to defend. If you truly value freedom, for which this country is supposed to stand, that means acknowledging that your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. So unless you're actually doing me physical harm, even if I disagree with what you say, I should defend your right to say it. So What's the point of Kaepernick living in a free country if he can't even sit down during the country's song? The answer is that he can. He can even burn an American flag every Sunday in his backyard and urinate on the ashes if he so desires. And if you have a problem with that, why don't you try using your freedom of speech to actually combat his ideas rather than just complaining about how disrespectful he is or calling him spoiled and un American? Speaking of Kaepernick's ideas, they're not that far off. I agree that people of color do have it harder in America. Granted, they have it better than any people of color generation who have lived here before them, and many chapters of their modern movements have gotten so fringe lately that they've gotten to doing more harm than good, like calling for death of police or telling white people to shut up and stand at the back, even when they're trying to support the same cause. But that's not the category into which Kaepernick falls. My problem with his choice is that, for one, it falls under slacktivism. You can make jokes about Rosa Parks doing nothing but sitting down all you want, but that's pretty much literally all that Kaepernick is doing. As I mentioned above, he's extremely rich, and like most professional athletes, he does some charity work and makes some charitable donations, but he's in a position to do a lot more for this cause than just remain seated for a publicity stunt, and that's kind of all this is. People are blowing it out of proportion, which is the best that you could hope for. It is a publicity stunt. But all he's really doing is getting out his message that black people deal with oppression in America, and that's not a particularly profound message these days. Is that really anything that people haven't heard by now, Colin? Do you really think that a police officer who was prepared to shoot an unarmed black kid is now going to steady his anxious trigger finger and think, wait, if I shoot this kid now, I'll have no chance to see Colin Kaepernick stand for the national anthem this Sunday? Well, I'm not going to have that on my conscience. Of course not. If you are going to actually protest something, then I think you need some more specific demands, and you may want to consider something bold like leaving the sport until your demands are satisfied. I've heard Kaepernick make the extremely reasonable claim that it's absurd how police in his part of the country only need 6 months of training, while a cosmetology license requires 4 times as much education. Well, Colin, you have yourself a damn good point there. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to say that until the state and federal mandates require a constable with a gun to have at least as much education as a hairdresser with a curling iron, then you can't justify expressing your pride in your country? There's actually a demand that could be met. Have you written a letter, maybe an open letter to your congressman, and requested your 874,000 Twitter followers to get involved in the political process rather than just bitch about it while remaining inactive victims of it? My only other problem with Kaepernick on this is that he's throwing the red, white, and blue baby out with the bathwater. If you want to make statements about why you're not proud of this country, you have to remember that it's a huge country with a massive tapestry of nuanced political and social opinions woven throughout its populace. Most citizens have even less of a voice than an NFL star. And when you make a statement about the whole country, that statement includes a lot of people. The USA isn't just the mustache twirling white villain who chooses to hire another white person over a black person with the same credentials, or the white cop who shoots an unarmed black kid. The USA is also the farmer who gets up before dawn every day to work hard for his family and whose contributions allow you to eat without spending a minute tilling the soil. It's the single mother who works as a nurse to save people's lives while supporting her children and paying off student debt. It's the racially diverse factory workers who sweat under thick leather to guard against the sparks all day, then go out for a cold beer together without even thinking about their different races, religions, or politics because they don't give a damn and they just want to make an honest living and enjoy the football game on Sunday. The USA is also the real activists who struggle and grind from the streets to the message boards to actually change people's minds and influence the politics that shape our society. So when you talk about how you can't possibly feel pride for a country that oppresses people of color, I understand what you mean, and I don't fault you one bit for not standing up. I just think you should consider that the very same country you're talking about has a massive population that spends their lives doing a hell of a lot more than that.